Oh, hi there, and welcome to my 10.1.7 Augmentation Evoker, the first support spec in World of Warcraft, which is very powerful. Currently, it seems that we're looking at 30% of our overall damage comes from us, while 70% roughly comes from the people that we are buffing via Prescience and Ebon Might. This makes it so that Augmentation Evoker is very much a force multiplier, which means that overall we're increasing a lot of our raid potential damage or our dungeon damage, while we are focusing more on the utility side of things. But first, let's go into the stats of the Augmentation Evoker. As always, intellect and main stat will be king in pretty much all situations, so that you want to make sure that you get as high item level as possible. The secondary stats you want to prioritize are specifically Mastery as your main stat. Mastery basically makes it so when we cast an Empower spell, which is our Fire Breath, our upheaval, we grant someone else the Shifting Sands buff, which is basically just a versatility increase or a short duration. Now, the second part of our mastery, this makes it so having more mastery increases the duration of our buff. Now, after mastery, you want to focus on a mix between crit and haste, but it's something you will have to sim. Now, versatility is not something we primarily focus on, so that would be primarily for a defensive stat value. Now, let's go over the talents. There are generally two generalized builds that I have here that I will be linking down below. And while you're down there, you might as well subscribe, right? For more guides now and in the future. So this is the general rating. The general rating build focuses on using time skip after every other cooldown usage. We're also focusing on having Plot of the Future, making it so that when we use our cooldown, we get 15 seconds of Bloodlust, Heroism, Fury of the Aspects. Now, in certain situations, there are many different variations of every build, and I highly suggest using eu.gg to keep up to date on what's the most popular builds, depending on whether you're doing tyrannical weeks, fortified weeks, or for each specific boss encounter. One example would be Cauterizing Flame on Forgotten Experiments Mythic because of the bleed removal. The general M+ build changes a little bit. Usually we have our 2-minute rotation, and we then have time skip on a 3-minute cooldown to reduce all of our cooldowns by 1000%. It's basically like a shifting power. In M+, we most of the time pick up Interwoven Thread, where rather than having an active that we have to use every 3 minutes, we're actually just having 10% flat cooldown reduction, which makes it way more suitable going from a pack to pack focus. These timings and mechanics is something that you will have to learn as an Augmentation Evoker. How do we actually play an Augmentation Evoker? The base idea is actually quite simple. You have Prescience, which is a buff, giving a player 3% crit chance, and occasionally they will fire off a duplicate of their abilities, healing 15%. You want to keep this up 100% of the time and on at least 2 targets, which isn't too difficult. The next thing is that you want to use Blistering Scales on your main tank, giving them additional armor and make it so whenever they are getting hit, they will do a little bit of damage. Now we're talking about Ebon Might. Ebon Might is our primary buff ability. Basically, we are increasing the 4 nearest allies' primary stat by 13% of our own, and we're also causing them to deal 24% more damage. If you have Prescience on, it will naturally target those Prescience targets. Now, during Ebon Might, using Eruption, Breath of Eons, or any of our Empower spells extend the duration of Ebon Might. This means that we will then use Fire Breath and Upheaval in every Ebon Might. Now, outside of using your Breath of Eons and Ebon Might, you want to be spamming Eruption, and then you want to fill in with Living Flame in single target and a Sure Strike in 2 or more target situation. So the opener you want to be doing as an Augmentation Evoker needs a 15-second pull timer at least. Now, if you have a Windwalker Monk in your group, this will naturally be an 18-second pull timer because of their opener. The idea is that in your pre-pull timer, you want to pre-cast Prescience on player 1. Then you want to apply Blistering Scales to your tank. Then once Prescience is back again, you want to put it on player number 2, use Tip the Scales, pre-cast Ebon Might, pre-cast Living Flame, Fire Breath at max rank, Upheaval at rank 1, Breath of Eons, Trinkets and Potions, Time Skip, and then you want to refresh Prescience, and then you're starting your Eruption until you can do another Fire Breath, which you normally want to be using at max rank, and another Upheaval. At this time, it's basically just Eruption and Living Flame in a single target situation, while you're keeping up your Prescience and your Blistering Scales. It's important to note that your Essence Burst will grant you more intellect and thereby giving you more damage, which will scale the rest of your buffs. Now you will continue doing this rotation basically until 30 seconds into the pull, where you can then start a new Ebon Might window. Something you can consider during your opener is to weave in a hover, because hover makes it so that we have basically no downtime during our opener, but that's your baseline open. Now, in an AoE situation, it is very similar to your single target rotation, except now we are having interwoven. You will still be following the same principle of keeping prescience on people, keeping blistering scales up, and then you're basically focusing on the same thing as before, keeping another prescience, Ebon Might into scales, fire breath on people, and our Breath of Aeon. Now we're just making sure we keep on all of our buffs on as many people as possible. And as you can see, I have 4 stacks of my upranking from Fire Breath, so my Living Flame will hit 5 targets. This grants us Essence Burst most likely, so we can have a faster eruption. In a dungeon setting, it is extremely simple because you only have 2 other DPS players, so just using Prescience on cooldown will naturally keep up Prescience throughout of the dungeon. You'd only want to be using Living Flame when you have the rank up from Fire Breath. Otherwise, you will be using a Sure Strike, as this is an instant cast and at least hitting 2 targets. But yeah, that's actually kind of all there is to the whole rotation. It's very much a simple rotational requirement from you, but maximizing your damage output through other people in a raiding encounter takes a lot of skill, knowing and tracking other players' cooldowns and when they're about to go and do a big hit. Now, I want to talk a little bit about using our healing abilities to emphasize damage component. Basically, we pick up Scarlet Adaptation. Now, Scarlet Adaptation basically makes so 20% of our effective healing is stored, and this will be added onto our Living Flame damage, which is just going to increase our filling damage. This means that we can actually use Emerald Blossom, Verdant Embrace. If we heal people, we will be doing more damage. Another thing is that in a raiding situation where we pick up Ancient Flame, casting either of these will reduce the cast time of our next Living Flame by 40%. By doing so, we can actually increase our DPS while being more of a support healer in those situations. It's not going to do a whole lot of difference, but it's something that you can use to basically increase your DPS and the general survivability of other people. And remember, you also have Rescue, where you can put on a shield for 30% of your HP to other people. Healing other people is not a downfall of our DPS, because we actually gain benefit from healing and helping our group. Augmentation Evoker is quite an interesting spec to be playing. It's the first support spec in World of Warcraft, and in my opinion, it's a very chill playstyle. There's a lot of things you can optimize, and there's a lot of things that you as a player can improve upon with more knowledge and more playtime on the specific spec. I currently think Augmentation Evoker is still too powerful, simply because the way that their buffs function. Because they work as a force multiplier, giving another burst class 70% more damage is going to be way more beneficial in a group setting than giving someone who does consistent damage. So I think as long as they don't fix that issue, we will always see an Augmentation Evoker in the highest tiers of play, simply because of the additional power level they actually grant to the group as a whole. Now, with that being said, it's a fun spec, and I hope they find a balance for it in the future, so that we can continuously enjoy playing this very fun spec. But yeah, with that being said, I hope that you enjoyed this guide, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!